Welcome back to New Persuasive Words. I'm Scott Jones.
And I'm Bill Bohr.
And Bill, here we are.
Yeah,
One more day. All my bags are packed. I'm ready to go. I'm standing here outside your door. I hate to wake you up to say goodbye.
So why
is this the song for RFK? Is he leaving in a jet plane or is he staying? Is he here to stay?
I don't know, man. I don't know. Oh, I was having my own clinical issues today, so I was not following.
It's just, do you feel better now that we're need medical attention that Kennedy could be on the job?
Yeah, no, that would not be helpful. That would not be helpful. Yeah, that's what a wild. I have no comment on that. So, and I'm sorry if I seem a little out of it because I'm having some eye issues. So
that's all right. We walk by faith and not by sight.
Yeah, the Apostle Paul and I, we both have the same thorn in the flesh right now. So, but I do think like the world being blurry, it might look a little better.
I listen to both Bob Denver and Frank Sinatra's version of that. First up, I don't think Bob Denver ever left a woman like that. I feel like Sinatra was singing that all the time in Vegas.
Yeah, actually, Bob Denver or John Denver, not Bob Denver.
John Denver, rather, not Bob
he
Denver.
He did multiple times. I think John Denver was married at least 3 times.
He doesn't sound like that kind of a guy, though.
No, he doesn't look like. He wouldn't look like that kind of guy. He also doesn't look like the kind of guy that would die in an experimental airplane either. But that's what happened. Yeah,
yeah.
I like Peter, Paul, and Mary's version. I think is the best version.
It's a great. Well, there are many versions of.
There are many versions of that, right?
Of Peter Paul. But I'll tell you what, though, I want to recognize something today because we try to be fair on this show politically. I want to say that Trump did his part to end the alleged genocide in Gaza today, right? I mean, this week, because he stopped sending condoms. He's trying to repopulate the West Bank and Gaza. We're
He also suggested as a side that they just move everybody out of there. Which shook the Middle East. Yeah. Well, yeah, I don't.
I mean, the rents are high. The rents are high everywhere. Where are you going to put them?
Yeah.
I mean, what? It's the real estate. It's tough. It's tough out there. Maybe he'll move them all to the Trump Hotel in D.C.
Oh, I'm sure that'll happen. Yeah.
Look, if the Arabs, he
thinks Gitmo is the solution for everything.
I'm calling Gitmo. Okay, this is a little controversy, but I'm now calling it Trump Cuba. We put them down there. It's like it's beautiful. There's new towels, new soaps, conditioner. Right. I mean, it's a Trump hotel. Fantastic. Yeah. Fidel, blessed memory, rest in peace.
Yeah, I do think, I think Trump could get it. I mean, Trump seems to be built to be in the concentration camp business. So he's already, So anyway, well, I think you wrote. Let's move off for that one. I'm literally in a very dark place right now. So
you are. For people that are watching, this is.
Well, no, it's trying to keep the eye in. It's very light sensitive. So you wrote another article which I liked, and you tapped into, I think, a fantastic podcast episode that has you thinking new thoughts. You've been very excited about this, and you've got me thinking new thoughts as well. So let's share this with our.
I had my thinking cap on, which was sponsored by Orvis.
Sponsored by Orvis. Well, two of my elders are in management at Orvis, and I keep telling them, "Hey, thank you for sponsoring our podcast." So
absolutely,
try to get some gear. So for all your fishing needs, shop Orvis.
Yeah, for everything, for fishing and this podcast was by Ezra Klein, who, if you don't listen to the Ezra Klein show, just amazing long form stuff. I mean, it's really. I mean, he's a great journalist, and he just
most insightful guys out there. And this podcast actually is maybe one of the first. For me, it feels like it's this may be part of the answer to understand what's going on right now. And
which is a moving target. I mean, it's not,
absolutely, no.
you know, I mean, I think it's, which is, yeah, I mean, I think,
But this is, I think, finding, like to me, spinning off on our last podcast, taking people's thought world seriously, that it gives, the things that we disagree with, the ideas that are fueling whatever, are important to people. It helps them organize the world. And so if we're going to understand what's happening, we do need to understand what these particular ideas, however we find them, what need are they fulfilling? And I think this little piece of the puzzle is helpful. It was helpful for me that you shared that you talked
about. So Klein has a guy on who is a New York Times opinion page contributor. I do not know his work very well, but I'm going to start following him. James Pogue, and he was a guy that for years has been covering the New Right and J.D. Vance, and I guess he and J.D. Vance used to be in the same hometown. I guess he's from Ohio or whatever, and he's sat down at like a diner a few years ago when Vance was just in the beginning of his Senate campaign. This is sort of the old hillbilly elegy Vance. This was before the convert. This is when he was saying Trump was the opiate for is a national opiate, right? And this is, I mean, he had terrible things to say about Trump before his conversion. They all convert. They all, as they say in Game of Thrones, they all bend the knee.
They all bend the knee.
Yeah. Sooner or later, they all bend the knee, Bill. But yeah, so I mean, he's talking about how largely the New Right, which is, Trump. Okay, Trump is. How do we say this? Trump is not the intellectual future of the right. He's which is hard to get your head around because he so dominates every square inch of the intellectual, cultural, well, not intellectual, but the cultural entertainment media space, right? Every square inch is just dominated. Trump. So it's tough to realize that he's a cipher, he's a symbol, he's the thing you pour in all he's the container you pour all your resentments into, right?
How aware do you think of the way he is of the wave he's riding? That would be an interesting question because he's certainly master of it at this point. But for instance, the Project 2025, the thing he never had heard of, which is being implemented every day, the last week and a half.
That was the best when he was like, "I don't even know it. I haven't heard of it. I don't like it." Like he hasn't heard of it. He also rejects it.
Right, except once he becomes president, and then every day, it's the playbook is being followed.
Didn't he say the same thing about David Duke?
He just. Yeah, he's like George Costanza on steroids. I didn't know that was wrong.
Was that kind of thing frowned upon? Because in my old office, that thing happened all the time.
Right. So no, it's an interesting thing because regardless of what he's aware of or how much he's pushing the button, I mean, he is the perfect, like you said, cipher for whatever we'll call it. What the New Right, is that what we're going to call it for this episode?
Yeah, the New Right.
Yeah.
But so there's the guy who we've talked about on the show, Curtis Yarvin, who's somebody that's extremely influential in the tech bro sphere, and that J.D. Vance is very into.
Right.
And Yarvin is somebody that thinks that basically the Pennsylvania farmer in 1800 it's the archetype of humanity, right? It all went downhill. Once it went to 1801. That's really the yeoman, gentleman farmer of Pennsylvania.
First half of 1801 is where everything went astray.
It's when the music died, Bill.
It was that damn Louisiana Purchase.
Yeah,
It just messed everything up, right? Having grown up in Pennsylvania farm country, uh, I mean, I love what they do, but oh my goodness, if you think the farmer, well, maybe the 1800 farmer was a different breed, but farmers are fascinating. They can do everything. They're always miserable. It's just it's a hard life. But yeah, I don't know. That's
yeah, and you have so Yarvin and a lot of these tech bros. It's funny because these guys in this, and Yarvin is a tech. His money was in tech stuff, right? All these guys.
These are the same guys that wear flannel shirts but don't know which end of an axe to pick up, right?
Exactly, and they all make their money in technology, and then run around and say technology is terrible for human life. That people walking around addicted to their phones is terrible, which most of us would agree with, right? I mean, on some level, their cultural critique is one that on the right and the left, but you have this rent economy where everything's about attention seeking and influence, and so these guys,
everybody becomes Oppenheimer after the bomb goes off, right?
Well, the other thing that all these guys read Ted Kaczynski.
Which that doesn't help me. That doesn't give me any comfort.
Yeah, I mean, you know who else? It's come out that Luigi Mangione on his Goodreads page was Ted Kaczynski's manifesto.
Oh, very nice. There we go. But there is a thread, and I think the Ezra Klein podcast hit on a thread. What is driving these guys? And I think that's a really interesting idea.
Yeah. So this is, I'll just read a quote that I posted on my Substack today. And I think this is a dialogue between Klein and Pogue. So Klein starts out, one intellectual difference between the left and the right that has felt very salient to me over the past couple of years is that the right is very interested in an old idea of human formation. How do you flourish into a man or a woman and pursue a certain sort of excellence? And the left is interested in something people connect it more to original sin, but it's a little about purging. It's about moving away from being what your base nature would make you and becoming enlightened above it. It's a remaking of the self away from your impulses, away from implicit bias, implicit discrimination. You look at what get called the bro podcasts, and they're very self-improvement focused. The left, on the other hand, is very therapeutic focused. There were big podcasts on the left in this period, like Maintenance Phase, that were very hostile to most self-improvement cultures. And I've actually thought this is a much bigger division line in our politics. I don't feel like I have this completely nailed down, says Klein, but in terms of the intellectual cultures, it is one of the ways they differ the most. And then Pogue's response is, to go back to Uncle Ted, which is what we're calling, I love that we're calling Ted Kaczynski affectionately Uncle Ted, right, which he will now be called on this show henceforth, Uncle Ted. To go back to Uncle Ted, as people call him, a lot of what people in the right-wing world like in that manifesto is actually not purely the tech critique. It's the parts where Kaczynski talks about how over-socialized the left is. And what he means there is sort of vague if you're not already a little bit in the headspace. But I'll start by saying that I don't think you could possibly be more right about that fundamental dividing line. Broadly speaking, it's not even just the leftist project. Liberalism is, to some degree, and he's talking about classical liberalism here, liberalism is, to some degree, an idea of, we got to a point where we almost thought we could reduce harms as a societal project, almost to a millenarian extent. The left really did feel like men can just be better. We can have a societal conversation, and suddenly men are going to behave in ways where in the workplace, we no longer have interpersonal sexual issues. The idea of reshaping human people into forms that actually just fit into collective structures well, and then policing the bounds of their behavior when they don't fit into these collective structures. I do think that really came to shape not just with leftism, but liberal centrism across the Western world. So it becomes a very difficult conversation to have an election where half the country is consuming these ideas via Twitter and podcasts and all the kinds of different things that liberals are not listening to or even aware of 90% of the time. And suddenly people are saying, no, we actually have a different conception of human nature than you. And then he says, I'm 38, and for most of my lifetime living under this kind of neoliberal establishment consensus, that conversation wasn't even possible to have in the public realm. And arguably, it's still not possible to have in the public realm because the media spheres are so separate.
Interesting. So one of the ways we, and when you were sending this to me, I was thinking about it, because in many ways, so much of Western culture, okay, has its basis in the Judeo-Christian world, right? That's kind of, and so you can think of almost every Western ideology, from capitalism to Marxism, as some kind of Christian heresy or Christian, a Christian idea that gets taken, out of a context and people grow with it. And what was interesting to me, that he even used the word original sin.
Right.
So there's a sense where let's go to the tech bros. I don't think it's accidental that they're converting to Catholicism, but they're not. But they're converting to a kind of semi-Pelagian Catholicism.
Yes.
And which is really interesting. Now, again, I think we all are semi-Augustinian, right, on our good days, but on our bad days, we're all semi-Pelagian. And
when the bad days started? The second half of 1517.
Right. We're going to have to reference him in the show notes. But our good friend and brilliant scholar, who
Adam Morton.
Adam Morton, our nickname for him is second half 1517. But and then on the other hand, you look at what actually he used the word original sin. But in the liberal world, their version of original sin would be very similar to the Gnostics' understanding.
You're absolutely right. That's exactly what I thought. It's like you're absolutely right that sin is beyond repair, right? I mean, you've got to. It is Gnostic, right? When he says you purge, the language there. It's funny because Ezra Klein, I don't know how. I mean, he's a very educated guy, but I don't know what he knows about ancient Christian doctrine and heresies, but he intuits that Gnostic stuff, right? I mean, he frames that the answer to original sin, because the Orthodox answer, right, is sort of redeeming it from the inside out.
Right.
The Gnostic answer is purgation, escaping, overcoming that nature. And that's interesting.
Yeah, and it's the inevitable. Gnostics are inevitably elite, right? So, and actually Pelagians end up being elite too. There's a kind of elitism in both of these trends, right? It's the reason.
What you're saying is neither of these things actually plays in the farmlands of Pennsylvania.
No, neither of them are about farmland, right? Because it's not Bible Christianity. For one, the liberals reject that. Okay, and we have a whole new group of Catholic converts that have embodied, cafeteria Catholicism, right? And so I'll be a Catholic.
Do you think the bishops are just scratching their heads going, "We're Protestants when we need them"?
Well, yeah. Well, I don't.
Wouldn't you guys be happier as United Methodists, or the PCA is lovely this time of year?
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And I see where PCA is still. Some of their chief spokesmen are still saying really wrong stuff. The Coral Ridge guy. Was taking to task the Episcopal bishop, other absurdity, what he was saying. But what's helpful, I think for me, one of the things that was helpful for this, it began to help me understand why I dislike both groups. Why? Because there's a sense where, and again, I'm not saying, my beliefs may be wrong, but there's a sense where I keep finding myself trying to stay grounded in historical Christianity. And part of historical Christianity tried to balance these things, tried to say no to whether it be the over paganizing tendency, the over Gnosticizing tendency of the Greco-Roman world, or this idea that I can do this myself, or that ultimately the Christian life is this ideal life of achievement, of self, it's ultimately the muscular Christianity or the heroes of God. I mean, both these things have had strong, influence of Christianity, and there's truth in both of them in some ways. But it's an interesting thing why, for those of us who have problems with both of these, I think by identifying their anthropology in this way, it helps us maybe at least understand it, but also kind of, well, what's an alternative anthropology? What's an alternative way that doesn't have to go either of these directions?
Yeah, and it's interesting because I think I was saying this to you before. What I like on the one hand, you have this new right that's sort of saying, look, let's go back to the farms of 1800. Let's go back to, with all these tech guys like Peter Thiel. It's just interesting, these guys that make their money in tech that
Right.
that say that this is so bad for you and you've got to go be Amish or whatever. But I mean, these guys are offering a
Well,
way.
it's like the barons who, they felt guilty, but they're not so guilty that they, not guilty enough, so they built Riverside Drive, right?
Right. And
Yeah,
the way back, the answer is in the past, and the way you get to the past is to go radically futuristic, right? I mean,
Right.
it's just a strange dynamic, right? But they're offering a program, right? I mean, they're in this part of the Patrick Deneen, who we've talked about this, the Harawazians, the Milbankians, they're inside and outside the Christian church. The people that say liberalism has failed, right? The Enlightenment project was largely a failure. It's this thing that's the ultimate narrative because it's the ingenious ultimate narrative because it pretends it's not a narrative. It pretends it's not a story. It's just based on rejection of stories, rejection of tradition, and good old fashioned, autonomous human reason and all this stuff. That sort of Enlightenment individualism, the promise to deliver us, the good life, and what's that book by Becker, The Heavenly City, the 18th century philosophers, that is bankrupt. And in its place, we'll give you a new traditionalism, right? And the left, it seems to me, offers, at the end of the day, inclusion. Like, hey, look, we want to enfranchise, we want to expand, we want to make sure everyone is included in the public square. Well, then to what end? Well, so that everybody can be at the capitalist consumer trough, right? So that everybody can have their own private idea, right? So there's not a sort of, I mean, there is a kind of collective vision with the new traditionalists and this new folks on the right, whereas on the left, it's just sort of, the odd thing is the left have become the defenders of the status quo, which is what you saw kind of in Kamala Harris in her campaign. It's awkward for the Democrats to be running around with Liz Cheney saying, look, things aren't so bad, right?
Well, but part of the thing that's, again, liberalism failed, or the Enlightenment project failed. Well, that's like saying that the Roman Empire collapsed, right? Because yes, it did collapse, but it was also, there was an awful lot of achievement, right? So part of the thing about it, one of the trouble with the collapse of Enlightenment is that our democratic ideals are Enlightenment ideals. Yeah, I mean, our version of democracy is an Enlightenment. Our government has the only kind of Enlightenment project that seems to have been sustainable for consistent. Because what happened in France, they had a radical vision, and then you end up with Napoleon, right? Democracy fails, and we end up with Napoleon Dynamite, as president. So, but the thing about it is that it's hard for those of us who do kind of believe in a common good, and I believe it more from historical Christianity, but I also, I'm a post-Enlightenment person, so I'm shaped by those ideals as well. So when we see somebody who was impeached twice for legitimate grounds, who was a convicted felon, who in civil court was held guilty for rape, you go on and on, who tried to overthrow the government, and when 50.4 or 50.5, whatever the number is, percent of the country votes for him. And I think some people, there were a percentage of those people who voted for him believed it was a lie. But what's more troubling is not so much the people who thought he was innocent, because God bless you if you are in that world, but the people who it didn't matter. It didn't matter that he was a bad person. It didn't matter that he had done these things. That, in some levels, should speak to uh, whatever's going on. That whatever a wholesale rejection and a wholesale looking for something, which I think they get at in this conversation.
Yeah, no, I think Trump. Look, I mean, you could say what you will about Trump, but he does deliver to his base, right? Like what he's doing now with the trans today was we're not going to fund hospitals whatever that do trans surgery or gender, whatever, gender reassignment stuff and all this stuff. These are, he appeases his base, and I think the people that wouldn't have. I mean, see, this is the thing, right? I mean, I think that what Klein and his interlocutor here are James Pogue are getting at is something that you might not have all of the descriptive and diagnostic tools that they have to put words to it, but a lot of people just feel it. A lot of people, I mean, Bill Maher on his show Friday said, he's like, look, everybody knows. There's always been gender dysmorphia. There's always been people that just didn't fit, right? Everybody knows that. But then it seems like the Democrats come along and say, everything's up for grounds until the kid's at least 5 or 7, and who the hell knows?
Right,
and whatever.
Right,
and it says, and what the voters said is, you know what? I guess we're a little more with Trump and those folks who are saying there's just 2 genders. Okay, look, I've known it since I was a little boy. In New York, there was like 2, right? And we know there's, and that's as high as I can count, 2. So there can't be more. Okay, 2. But like, so that's, the country just looks at that and says, look, I don't know, with all, I want to make space for people that don't fit. And I know there's exceptions, but man, this is just too much, right? And I think that so much of what it seems like the left has inclusion in spades, and which, look, I'm for inclusion. I'm not against inclusion, right. But I'm just saying that narrative, though, without a story to tell that undergirds it and says, hey, in light of the massive, the idols are teetering here, and there's an issue, and here's the story we're going to live into. Here's there's not, and that's what, again, I think the new right has. They've got a story. Right.
They have a story. It's some of it's very dark and troubling. The implications of this story.
The optimistic parts are dark and troubling.
That's right. Then we get to the real stuff.
Then we get to Uncle Ted.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think there's a sense where, there are parallels in
history. Do you think, what are the odds? Oh, wait, Trump can't pardon Luigi because it's not a federal crime. It's a state crime, right?
Yeah, I think his rich backers would have a trouble with him pardoning Luigi. Apparently, you can. Turkish bribery is going to be okay in the Trump administration. The mayor of New York may be getting his. Boy, what Faustian deal was that? But don't
you think Trump just loves this? Just loves people doing loves the patronage. Loves the bending of the knee, loves putting Zuckerberg on camera, loves putting, the whole thing. It's not ideological. This is where I'm like, Trump is just not as interesting. I mean, he's great for entertainment, right? And for terror, but he's just not
entertainment and terror. Yeah, in case our listeners missed that second one, because that's an important one. Yeah.
And Zora the Gay Blade, I forget the name of the actor, but he's a famous actor. He says, "It's a lovely day for the reign of terror." But Trump will ultimately come and go, and it's not an ideologue. This is where I think the new right, with the sort of Human Improvement Project and take your iPhone and go to Central Pennsylvania and start pushing a plow, and this is what we've talked about way back in the day, right? The Benedict option, the Rod Dreyers. This stuff, all J.D. Vance was writing in the American Conservative, where Dreyer was, right? All these guys that's a story.
Yeah.
But what's interesting though is how, you're writing for the American Conservative. You've got this sort of Curtis Yarvin and, hey, society, the liberal project is done. And you're a heartbeat away from running the liberal project, from being president of the United States. I mean, so what do? You just you close for business. I mean, like we're doing with all the federal agencies. I mean, let's say you do have President Vance. What is do you just say, hey, I'm presiding over the closing of this and the opening up of the new thing?
I don't know. It'll be interesting to see if that happens. Yeah. Yeah. It also will be interesting to see if at any point, because again, all these executive orders, I mean, he makes the executive order, then 2 days later, he rescinds the executive order. I started reading one where he's going to do away with anti-Semitism on campus, and and anti-American universities will be punished. So it'll be interesting to know what his definition of an anti. Maybe Trump University will come back. Maybe they'll rename Harvard. Trump.
Okay, I just love that. I'm going to do away with anti-Semitism, and you know what? There's going to be no more traffic jams at rush hour.
No, yeah.
And everybody gets a pony. Okay, yeah.
Well, one way to do away with one way to guard anti-Semitism is put them on your cabinet, and you keep them close to you. I'm just saying, if it smells like a anti-Semitic, if it raises its hand no, I'm serious. I mean, this is going to be. I think it'll be interesting to see who's next. The immigrants are low-hanging fruit in terms of, because it's kind of like they came for the immigrants and I was silent. It'll be interesting to see the next wave.
I know who's next. I'm getting chatter out there among the commentary. It's UCC pastors in Vermont. That's next. That's on the list.
Yeah, well, at least we have guns. We'll go down. We're gonna. This isn't like UCC. This isn't like Episcopal bishops in DC. There will be.
There's guns in Maple.
Vermont liberals with guns. It'll be. There'll be a little pushback.
Guns and maple syrup. That's all you need.
There'll be a little pushback when that invasion happens, but nonetheless, no. I do think, for me, the constructive part of this is that what do you say to the Gnostics, right? And what's the answer to the Pelagians? Well, there's a sense where that salvation comes, where to real humans where they're at, and humans, even our best to the Pelagians would say even our best efforts, right, are mixed. Okay. And to the Gnostics, it's not about leaving. It's not about kind of an elitism. It's not about a self-made salvation. It's not about your own personal spiritual journey. It's interesting that the therapeutic community and self-help, this therapeutic, my personal path of spirituality, all that stuff. It's all just a big version of an exaggerated sense of self. The interesting thing is, so is Pelagians. I mean, they're ultimately both guilty of original sin, the original sin, right? My own ability to reform myself, or I'm better than everyone else, and those who are less than me will just have to left.
So what you're saying is you're with John Meacham, and you're saying it all goes back to Genesis 3.
It kind of does go back to
It all goes back to Genesis 3. There's nothing new under the sun.
No. So I think both of these schools of thought, both of these divides are offering a salvation that is foreign to the one that historical Christianity, in many ways, different than the historical Judaism offers as well.
Yeah. And you know what I got when I was listening to stuff and sending you some notes and stuff, it got me really thinking of the urgent need for the evangelization of the public square. That the Christian theology has something to say. Yeah, I remember Jeff Stout, my teacher at Princeton, who was an atheist, used to read theology, Walter Storff and Barth and all this stuff. And I said, why do you? You're an atheist, we said one day. Why do you read this stuff? He says, well, when I read, you read theology, and you don't just read theology, you read Orthodox theology. He's like, well, when I read liberal theology, I think I'm reading bad psychology, bad sociology, or bad political theory. And I'm arguably at the best university in the world. I can read and talk to the best psychologists, the best social theorists, the best political scientists, but when I read Orthodox Christian theology, he said there's a different voice that you don't get anywhere in the conversation. It was just interesting. This is one of the smartest guys I've ever interacted with. And for him to say that as an atheist he was also the guy that said the problem with liberals like Gustafson is they gave him less in which to disbelieve. but I mean, for a guy like that to say, and it just made me think that yeah, we need theology. We need the explication of the faith and the witness to the faith in the public square, and one that's not thin, but one that's thick and robust and rooted in the most substantive and rich tellings of the Christian story.
Well, there's a sense where I'm thinking, like in the new right, there needs to be, it's kind of like barbarian Europe or the Aryan, barbaric tribes, right? We need a new breed of like those hardy Irish monks who confronted the barbarians, who confronted the heretics and converted them to Orthodox Christianity. I think we
got to send Ken Tanner.
Ken Tanner, maybe, yeah.
Yeah.
A Ken Tanner type in that.
Ken Tanner would be, he would be the guy to missionize some of these people.
I was, in our brother Strawbridge of blessed memory. I wonder if maybe he would have come to his senses about Trump, given some of the things we've seen, and maybe people like that. Maybe there are people already in that kind of who will see what's going on around them isn't division. I mean, maybe some of these Catholic converts will actually read good Catholic theology. Will maybe embrace this new faith that they have, and instead of it being a cultural appropriation of a Catholicism, a militant Catholicism they want to use as a weapon, that they actually maybe listen to St. Francis de Sales, whose feast day was this week, and who single-handedly converted back 150,000 Calvinists under his bishopric, as someone who said that the heart of the gospel is love and the love of Christ, and also transformation at the same time. On the liberal side, I already see some things, because I think there's a great soul searching, because there's a realization this hasn't worked. There's a realization that and these are people of goodwill, that what did we get wrong here? And I see in my own community, in my own little small segment of the planet, a lot of very traditional liberal people. The vast majority of people up here did not vote for Trump, but there's a soul searching. So what did we miss? And so I think there's an opportunity to convert people who have drifted away from, who like some of the sentiment of Jesus, but have drifted away from we need to convert some Gnostics up here, and we need to get some Pelagians back into the Orthodox fold on the other side.
And the good news is the gospel's big enough to do it all.
It is.
As is its Lord and Savior. And Bill, the beat goes on.
The beat goes on.